Particular area of the Muslim faith. You were complaining in your article in The Spectator that in one primary school music was banned. That's kind of another issue, but raffles and tombolas were banned. I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to encourage Muslim children to gamble? What's your problem with that? It should reflect the nature of the school.
So first they came for the tombolas.
For what?
Look, the problem
gambling
going on
wrong
here,
in those communities.
The problem going on here is we're in the middle of a debate. I mean, the nation is going through something very substantial change, and I think that what we've been discussing in recent days and what we've been discussing this morning kind of reflects this. I mean, until very recently, you know, if you said to people, and it comes back to the British values thing as well, if you said to people until very recently, what is Britain, what are British values, you'd have got a fairly clear reply along the lines of, you know, a Protestant Christian country, we have institutions of church and state and monarchy and so on, which represent the country. As one of the results of mass immigration of recent decades, there has been a substantial change in the country. All sorts of good things have come from that, and some negatives have. But one of the things that has come from it is this confusion about what it is we are. We want to be open and tolerant. We want people to be able to practice their faiths. We want people to be able to express themselves and live the lives they want to live. What we're finding it very hard to do at the moment, and I mean the French secular example has already come up, is to work out where our lines are drawn as a nation, because they're not clear at the moment.
It's impossible to draw those lines, isn't it?
It may prove impossible. It may be that we do something like the French state did and try to draw very clear lines. That's what you've heard in recent days. There's a bit of it already this morning, that, you know, there's a problem with some schools that are actually, you know, state secular schools that happen to have had...
How bad are these problems?
The problems exposed in Sir Michael Wilshaw's report are pretty serious, and there's more to come.
Really, what's so serious in the report?
I think, for instance, I mean, Wilshaw himself says that these children are at risk of cultural isolation. There have been findings of children, for instance, being taught in assembly to chant anti-Christian chants and so on. This is very unpleasant sectarian stuff.
Did you know that none of the kids were spoken to?
But
did you know that none of the people in that school were spoken to during that so-called investigation?
And
the teachers were not spoken to either. You come to Stamford Hill, where I live, we're not far away from our house. We have a particular community, the Jewish community, who live in a very isolated way. Nobody says anything about them. I have no problem with that. Hold on, I have no problem with that. If that's what they want to do, that's their choice. But we don't create a big fuss over the Jewish communities, especially that particular community living in that way.
Why
cause a fuss over a report that was made out of a hoax letter, as well as...
You acknowledge there are issues.
I did say at the beginning.
Rabbi Laura.
First of all, you're talking about faith schools. We're talking about state schools. Yes, that's the first thing. Yeah. Second thing...
Many of the schools are funded by the state.
You're not going to interrupt me. Stop. The second thing is what should be taught in schools. Actually, I think you should be teaching about religions. So that doesn't mean you have to believe. But if we don't know what other people believe, we won't have the literacy to challenge the idea of what you mentioned, you used your language, of the true faith.
But it's not just...
So I would say there are faiths out there, and Britain is about acknowledging truth of faith. And the third thing is about what you tolerate. The third thing is about what we tolerate. I don't think that everything goes, and I think that if there is incitement to hatred, to racial hatred, or gender hatred, or about sexuality, actually you do restrict that.
OK, but Douglas Murray... Don't worry, we've got a lot of time. Douglas Murray, you can't force people to believe things. You can't shoehorn people into a particular Douglas Murray-shaped, David Cameron-shaped Britishness. Can you?
No, I mean, this is part of... By the way, just very quickly, I mean, on this matter of this, I mean, I do think that one of the things...
But address that issue about...
OK, can I just mention first, one of the interesting things that's come up in recent days and weeks, I think, over this whole Trojan horse business, is I think that some Muslims in this country, in particular a lot of Muslim spokespeople, a lot of Muslim groups have been furious about these revelations and are now denying them. They're still denying them. And this is something like happened in the Catholic Church over the paedophilia scandal. People just don't want to admit it. They don't want dirty laundry to be aired in public. They genuinely think that... And that's why there's still this denial, even now. There's an official report by Sir Michael Wilshaw. It's found some very disturbing things. Some people still think that they don't exist.
Is this the same Sir Michael Wilshaw who just did a U-turn on what Gov did or didn't tell him?
But Miriam, the thing... Either you think this has all been... Do you think this has all been made up?
I think...
Do you think it's all been made up?
What I actually know is that there are serious serious governance issues, there have been internal administrative issues, whether there are issues of extremism, which is what you're peddling, and what, in fact, the publication you work for is peddling by publishing one of the worst covers in this country that I have ever seen, suggesting that young children are vehicles for extremism and terrorism. You should be ashamed to be associated.
Daniel, in a minute.
Can I just give? This is a very good example of the problem. Miriam, you are a very prominent spokesperson. You're a voice. You're a very prominent convert to Islam. You have a voice.
I'm not. I don't call myself a convert.
Okay,
so don't call me one.
Whatever it is you want to call yourself. You have a voice. Here are some problems that are coming up, which have been exposed in schools, that seem to be teaching very seriously unpleasant things, and they're being taught by some extremist Muslims. Why, in this debate, you first of all deny that that is going on, and secondly, think the problem is a Spectator cover cartoon.
I've never denied that there are issues.
I do not understand.
On these three,
the problem is not the Spectator cover.
I think the issue is you're
Miriam
trying
first.
to
I want to speak to Daniel Hannan. Miriam, respond to that.
You're trying to suggest what you're trying to do is support the Gove's agenda here, which is there are absolutely issues within these schools, and I think everyone, including the Hands Off Birmingham School campaign and others, have acknowledged that there are certain people who should even stand down as a consequence of some of the revelations in this report and reports that will come. The issue, however, is trying to rebrand this as an issue of extremism in order to expand this idea of extremism being non-violent ideas.
Or indeed Nick Griffin had been asked to come along and speak in a school.
Neither of the equivalents of those two individuals were invited to speak in these schools.
Well, I'm sorry, Shadi Al-Sulaiman is a man who's called... What?
His views are worse than...
What are his views?
Well, anyone who supports Al-Qaeda in public, anyone who supports the ideology of Al-Qaeda...
Who says he supports
Al-Qaeda? Anyone who supports the
I'm not defending him, but who says...
He's not being stoned to death.
He should be invited to address...
Are you saying he's not as bad as Geert Wilders and Nick Griffin? Wait, one at a time.
I'm absolutely saying he should be invited to address
You're saying he's not as bad as Geert Wilders or Nick Griffin?
I'm saying you can't compare the people who are speaking in these schools. I don't know about this particular speaker.
Mary, let me finish my point, please.
You can finish your point, but I'm saying to you, you have to allow people to speak in this country.
Allow me to speak then. Allow me to speak. Anyone who believes in stoning people to death, Nick Griffin has reprehensible views, but he doesn't believe that an adulteress should be stoned to death. Anyone who does should not be invited to a school. And nor should
does that include Jewish rabbis?
And nor should
let's have a question. And the next on the list is Daniel Hannan, and I will come to you. No, not yet, please. Please, there's a lot of people, a lot of very interesting people to talk to.
If we can all agree that Nick Griffin should not be invited to speak to children...
Of course he shouldn't, and neither should this speaker, but nobody said he should.
Can I finish my point? And if we can agree there, then we should also, by implication, agree that anyone who believes in ideas far more reprehensible should not be invited to speak at schools. It's a moot point. It's just not something we should even be debating.
Yes, it's a platitude.
The fact that we're defensive about that is illustrative of the problem.
I'll come to you with it. Douglas, we haven't heard from you for a while. Give me a second. Douglas first.
Let's say a couple of things. First of all, I always think it's useful. The former Bishop of Edinburgh, Richard Holloway, had a very good line on this. He said that the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. And I think it's worth bearing in mind. Look, I just wanted to mention also, comes back to something I said earlier, but the period we are in of churn and rethinking about what it exactly is what the Prime Minister has been writing about this morning. Everyone's trying to nail these values down.
Nailing jelly to a wall.
And one of the things about this is, and I think it's just the reaction to Andrea's comments, a good example of that. Nobody, it seems, is very keen on admitting where, I mean, I speak as a secularist, but nobody's very keen on admitting the Christian origin of some of these things, and I think we have to be frank about that. We can't write our heritage out or pretend it was something else. And just very quickly, one of the things that is being done on this, which has come up several times this morning, is this attempt to sort of encompass everybody in the new values. I mean, sometimes, you know, it's all freedom, good, openness, great tolerance, yes. It's all fine. There is a risk, however, in this, and it comes back to the thing about always highlighting gay marriage and other things, again, something I'm supportive of. But there is a risk in this that we build up this new value system on extremely wide ground, because it's ground we want to be as wide as possible to encompass everyone, but it might also be ground that's very shallow. And I would suggest that some of the things we're talking about, if you identify your country solely on some of the lines we're discussing at the moment, it could yet prove to be, and this comes back to the point the lady in the back made, it could prove to be too shallow for some people, and I think that's something we have to think
Well,
about.
Peter, you say in your column today, this whole thing about... Well, okay, the gentleman now wants to say something, then I'll come to you, Peter. You're very insistent. So let me just bring the microphone. Oh, very quick, we'll run out of time.
I'm a 91-year-old gay man, following what these gentlemen have said. I'm living in a relatively friendly gay city of Brighton. I'm in an 18-year-long loving relationship with my partner. I campaign to combat homophobia. I used to say to people, please understand. I've been married, had 3 children, I've got 3 grandchildren, but I've always been gay. People have said to me, you can't possibly be gay. I didn't choose to be, I am gay. Now, I stopped asking people to understand because I don't understand myself. So I now say to people, please accept